With there being an insane amount of exotic weapons in Destiny 2, it can be hard to know which ones you should actually be using and which ones you should try and get. The Monuments to Lost Light is an exotic vendor in the tower that can help some new players get an easy access to exotics. However, even in this inventory, there is an insane amount of exotics to choose from. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering the top 10 best weapons that you should buy first from the Monuments to Lost Light, as this will help you extremely well in your Destiny 2 career. Obviously, with these weapons being exotic, it can cost you quite a few materials to actually buy them, so make sure you pick your favorite ones first, and that's what I'm here for today. So tune in till the end to see what you like. Now, in no particular order, starting the list off with the Sleeper Simulant. Now, the Sleeper is an exotic heavy linear fusion rifle that hits like a monster. Now, the Sleeper Simulant has been around for a very long time, and although there is plenty of brand new, legendary linear fusion rifles that come out with all these amazing perks like bait and switch, rewind rounds, the Sleeper Simulant still performs extremely well and still sits up there in the top 5 DPS for linear fusion rifle damage. The main reason the Sleeper does an insane amount of damage is because of its intrinsic trait. Now, I'm not even going to pronounce how to say this one, but basically, the massive laser that comes out of this weapon will actually over-penetrate and rebound off multiple surfaces. If you're lucky enough, this will rebound and then re-hit the boss, dealing extra damage. Unfortunately, like a few exotic weapons in this list, you will need the catalyst in order for this gun to perform at its best, and the Sleeper Simulant definitely needs its catalyst. The catalyst gives it extra ammo and will also speed up the weapon charge time. So unfortunately for the Sleeper, you will need the catalyst to make it viable. Coming up next, we have the Isagi's Burden, one of the DPS kings in the game. Now, I'm pretty sure in this point in Destiny 2, everyone should have the Isagi's Burden, but if you don't, you should definitely buy this one right now. The Isagi's Burden was used in pretty much every single DPS rotation. However, this one has sort of been replaced by the Still Hunt, but the Isagi's Burden is still better in certain scenarios, and you should still definitely get one. Basically, the way this weapon works, you have 4 shots in one mag, but by holding the reload button down, you consume all these 4 and put it into one massive juiced up bullet that does an insane amount of damage to bosses. It's very simple to add into any of your DPS rotations, and it helps just chunk that extra bit of damage in your DPS rotation. This weapon is extremely easy to use and also extremely useful, and you should definitely have it in your loadout. Everyone knows what the Isagi's Burden is. I'm going to stop talking about it now. Coming up next, we have the Leviathan's Breath. Now, the Levi's Breath is a heavy combat bow that does an enormous amount of damage. One of the drawbacks from this gun is it has a very small ammo count, being only 15 shots if you have the catalyst. However, you can bump this up by using ammo reserves, but still it is a very short ammo count. However, where this bow is short in ammo, it is definitely not short in damage. This thing hits like an absolute monster. Unfortunately, this is another weapon where you do need the catalyst. Like I said, this will increase your ammo count, but the main perk in this gun is the draw time decreases after every precision hit. If you don't have the catalyst, the draw time on this weapon is extremely slow, making it pretty much useless and you should not use it. However, with the catalyst, this weapon is extremely viable and it deals massive damage to bosses. It also has intrinsic unstoppable built in, making it pretty useful for any GMs that you want to use it in. Another bonus with this weapon is because each bolt hits so hard, it will actually slightly stun the boss or the mini boss, whatever it is, giving you time to do whatever you need. It will stun the boss. This weapon is also void, so you can pair it with volatile rounds, making it do even more damage. Coming in at number 4, we have the Wither Horde. Now, the Wither Horde is overall just one of the best grenade launchers in the game. You can use this for ad clear, you can use it for boss DPS. Whatever it is, this weapon is amazing. Lucky for us, this weapon doesn't need the catalyst, however the catalyst will give it auto-loading holster, making it pretty useful. Now basically, the way this weapon works is it shoots out a grenade launcher shot that will damage enemies over time if you stick them, or you can just stick it to the floor. Either way, if you stick it to the floor, it's going to create an area of effect damage. If you stick it to the boss, it's just going to tick the boss down and do damage over time. If you're using it for a boss encounter DPS rotation, you can just stick the boss, put it away, and it's going to auto reload if you have the catalyst. If you want to min-max your damage with the Wither Horde, you can stick the boss and then shoot the floor beneath it, adding 2 times tick damage, and this is the maximum damage that you can do with Wither Horde. You only want 1 person in your fire team using the Wither Horde, or you can have 2 people using it, just coordinate, 1 person sticks the boss and 1 person sticks the floor. If you're using it for ad clear, it's also very effective. If you know where the enemies spawn, just keep shooting the floor where they spawn, and as soon as they spawn in, they're going to be in the area of effect damage and pretty much just die. Overall, this is probably one of my favorite and most unique guns in the game, and I definitely enjoy using the Wither Horde quite often. Coming up to the halfway mark here, number 5, I would recommend buying the Dragon's Breath. Now the Dragon's Breath came out just a couple seasons ago, and this weapon is actually extremely useful. This rocket launcher isn't really a DPS king, but more of an ad clearing / mini boss king. To summarize this weapon, basically it builds up intrinsic stacks of fuel, and then when you shoot that rocket launcher, it's going to spill that fuel everywhere, causing fire damage all over the battlefield. Any enemies that walk into this fire / fuel are going to receive scorch stacks, and eventually they will ignite once they get enough scorch on them. If you stick the boss, this boss will get full of scorch stacks and also ignite over and over and over again. Obviously this ignite damage is a massive AoE effect, killing all adds and dealing massive damage to bosses. This is very useful in a room where it's tight knit and there's heaps of adds. All you have to do is stick the biggest, hardest enemy right in the middle, and then all the ignites and scorch are going to spread all across the battlefield, causing massive ignitions. This was definitely one of my go-to weapons when playing Onslaught in Into the Light, and it is still extremely useful in Onslaught right now. Next on the list is the Polaris Lance. Overall, this is probably one of my favourite scout rifles in the entire game. I like to call it the long-range sunshot. This is pretty much just a solar scout rifle, however after landing 4 precision hits, the next shot will be a delayed solar explosion projectile. It will also apply Scorch, and if you do enough of these shots on the same enemy and get enough Scorch stacks, the enemy will eventually ignite. Not to mention, this explosive shot after landing 4 precision hits will do explosive damage, giving everyone around that enemy more Scorch stacks. This weapon is extremely useful at long range because you can just keep chaining headshotting one enemy, applying Scorch all over the battlefield, and then enemies will chain ignite. This is definitely one of my favourite weapons to use in any Grandmaster Nightfall, where you can sit at range and deal decent chunk damage, and then the enemy is going to ignite eventually, dealing more damage. If you get the catalyst on this weapon, it basically just gives it Dragonfly, so any enemies that you kill with a precision hit will then also explode in a solar burst, adding more Scorch stacks to the battlefield. Overall, this is an extremely useful and fun weapon to use, and I would definitely recommend getting it if you haven't got one. Coming up next, we have the Legend of Acis. Now, once again, this weapon heavily relies on getting the catalyst for this gun. So if you buy this gun, pretty much don't use it until you get the catalyst for it. The catalyst is basically a make or break with this gun. What the catalyst does is it gives the weapon trench barrel. So upon landing a melee hit with this weapon out, it's going to increase the damage of your next 3 shots. I'm not sure what the exact percentage of damage increase is, but I know it's enough to make this weapon a make or break if you don't have it. Either way, in the history of Destiny, there has been plenty of bosses where you sort of just sit there and, Acis the boss at very close range, or you use a sword or something similar. You pretty much are definitely going to need a close range DPS weapon at any point in your Destiny 2 career, and the Legend of Acis is one hell of a weapon. Up next, we have the Ace of Spades. Now this is purely a PvP pick. No matter if you hate PvP or you just don't play it, at some point you will definitely have to play it to get some sort of reward that you want, and having the Ace of Spades is just overall one of the best weapons to use in PvP, giving you a solid platform to use when you do eventually go into PvP. The weapon can 3-tap, it just feels nice, and overall just one of the best hand cannons to use in PvP, so if you don't have a solid PvP loadout, buy the Ace of Spades for a solid platform. Coming up next, we have the Bad Juju. Now the Bad Juju is definitely a throwback to Destiny 1, however with the release of the final shape, Pulse Rifles got a massive PvE damage boost. And with this damage boost, it's pretty hard just to ignore Pulse Rifles and just continue on with what you're using before. Pulse Rifles are definitely meta now, they do an insane amount of damage and a lot of them can have very good perks on it. And having the Bad Juju is a very solid starting platform. This weapon's exotic intrinsic trait is amazing. Basically, getting any kill with the Bad Juju with this exotic perk will refill your magazine, it's going to increase the damage the weapon does, and then it will also grant you super energy. Overall, this is just an amazing weapon perk to have. If you're a newer player coming to Destiny 2, this is a great weapon to start off with, and I definitely recommend buying the Bad Juju until you get some of the better legendary pulse rifles in the game. And wrapping the list up here with number 10, we have the Le Monarque. This bow is extremely useful, and I love using this bow. This is probably one of my favourite guns to use on the Hunter loadout with the Gyrfalcon's chest piece. Obviously this weapon is void, so you can pair it with volatile rounds, and using this on the Hunter subclass with the Gyrfalcon's exotic chest piece makes this build extremely useful and extremely overpowered. Not to mention, every shot that you shoot with this bow will also inflict poison, and then that poison will also spread. It also has intrinsic overload built in, making it a great weapon to use in GMs. As you can see from the footage you're seeing, this weapon is so good, and I love using it especially on the Hunter subclass. It is still extremely useful on the Warlock and Titan, but that Gyrfalcon's chest piece on the Hunters is just way too good to not pair with this weapon. But anyway, guys, that will wrap the video up there. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to drop a like, subscribe, comment down below, and if you didn't, drop a dislike if you feel the need to. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.